I think the man who was more complacent than anybody else in this country was David Cameron at the time, because he just thought he can do this referendum to quieten down his fruitcakes, as he called them, the ultra-Brexiteers, and didn't really work hard enough on it. He didn't really prepare it well. And that's how he just ran into it and dragged the country down there and then just left. And I think he totally underestimated the grievances in the country, and that's why he couldn't really foresee what he would lead the country into with this referendum.
I think the Remain campaign, the Stronger In campaign, as it was called, just failed to understand the emotional clout that the Vote Leave campaign was bringing to bear. So while the Remain campaign was talking about how much your basket of shopping was going to be costing, the Leave campaign was talking about something much more fundamental, much more emotional, about taking your country back.
Churchill's leadership saved Britain, Europe, and the world from Nazism. Nye Bevan created the NHS. Alan Turing helped break the Nazis' secret codes, which shortened World War II. These British heroes changed the world. Don't believe those who talk Britain down, who say we're too weak to control our own affairs. Let's take control.
They ran a brilliant campaign. They understood about how you emote people. And it was, 3 words, 3 seconds, repeat, repeat, repeat. It's the old marketing tricks that they use, and they did it incredibly well. It wasn't about facts and figures, and it wasn't about the detail, because people had moved on to one-issue politics.
The Remain campaign wasn't even speaking the same language. I think they massively misunderstood the debate that was happening, and they brought to it a very economically based, transactional based, seemingly rational set of arguments, but that had absolutely no emotional clout whatsoever. So you had David Cameron pretty much fronting this campaign, thereby, encouraging all of those people that had any number of grievances with the government to give the establishment a bloody good kicking, and why wouldn't they? So it feels to me as if that was an absolute own goal, and it was a bad campaign.
So Take Back Control was a problematic slogan for a number of reasons. One, it said that people's feeling of a lack of control came from our membership of the EU, whereas it's really about the fact that we don't really have real control over Westminster. The party that's always in charge with a majority of the seats is always voted for by a minority of the people, which means that the majority of voters don't actually have any influence on what Westminster does. And yet they pointed that feeling of powerlessness at the EU, and that was never the real problem.
I think the EU had nothing to do with those grievances. I mean, the EU wasn't even debated. Nobody was interested in the EU when I came here in 2008, 9, 10. It wasn't a topic. Nobody cared, really. It just worked somehow. So I think in a very clever way, the Vote Leave campaign misdirected these grievances towards the EU, and that worked really well, as so many papers, especially the tabloids, had already prepared the ground over years. Cameron himself had prepared the ground by always giving in a little bit to this argument. So it was totally misdirected, and all these grievances that led to Brexit had nothing to do with the EU in the first place.
Decency and honesty are not words that I would associate with the Leave campaign. I think it was a very clever campaign. They were certainly a lot cleverer than the Remain campaign. But I think they manipulated information. They lied, frankly. They were pretty shameless. So they lied their way into getting a lot of people to vote for them on a false prospectus. Of course, the biggest lie, at least in terms of people's public perception, was the famous £350 million on the side of the bus that was meant to go to the NHS.
Hello, I'm Emma. Nice to meet you. Welcome to my hometown. Come on in. Come on in. Make it a bit quieter. I think Brexit is something that was very clearly sounded straight from the get-go of the referendum. I don't think there was any way anybody could escape from hearing it. To be honest, throughout the whole process, I was very 50-50. I wanted to ensure that however I voted, I wanted to try and make a decision that I wouldn't regret. And very clearly, one of the things I remember seeing is the big red bus.
And if we vote leave on June the 23rd, we can take back control of £350 million a week and spend on our priorities here in this country, including on the National Health Service. We can take back.
For me, the NHS is something I'm very passionate about. I've got 2 amazing neurodivergent children with additional conditions. And it was also during this time that our local A&E was facing possibly being closed or having resources pulled away from it. So that money aspect was something that did sway me.
Of people in this country who have to
Look at my children. We really need these services. We really need these services, and if there's anything that I can do to secure it, of course I'd like to do it. So I did my vote, handed it in, I was a bit like, okay, it's done. I didn't feel anything massive in particular, to be honest.
Tonight at 10, the voters decide that after 4 decades, it's time for Britain to leave the European Union.
The dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom.